When you think of the book of Romans, you probably think of this really dense, heavy theology. And you're not wrong. But underneath all of that is an absolutely dramatic human story. It's a story about division, about upheaval, and about a wild plan to pull a broken community back together. So in this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers and uncover the real reason this famous letter was ever written in the first place. Let's get into the story behind the theology.
I mean, that's a question we're all still asking, right? In our neighborhoods, our countries, sometimes even our own families. It feels like such a modern problem, but it's the exact same one that a tiny, brand new community was facing right in the heart of the Roman Empire. And that's the real twist here. The guy who wrote this incredible letter about unity had never even been to Rome. He didn't know these people personally. So what's the deal? Why did he care so much about their arguments? Well, to figure that out, we have to go back and see how this community even came to be in the first place.
Okay, so first things first, how did the Christian community in Rome even get started? Because, unlike a lot of other early churches that were deliberately planted by an apostle, Rome's church was kind of an accident.
Yeah, there was no famous apostle. The whole story kicks off with just a bunch of ordinary pilgrims. It all starts in Jerusalem during the festival of Pentecost. Jewish pilgrims from all over the world, including some from Rome, heard that very first Christian message. And it just lit a fire in them. So they carried that message all the way back home and planted the first seeds of a new faith right in the capital of the empire. And let me tell you, this thing just exploded. This timeline shows that just a couple of years after Pentecost, little house churches were already popping up all over Rome. It wasn't some top-down strategy, it was a totally organic, grassroots movement. And because it was founded by these Jewish pilgrims, the church had a really specific feel to it. It was, for all intents and purposes, a Jewish-centric community. They followed Jewish customs, cared deeply about dietary laws, observed specific holy days. The entire culture was shaped by its Jewish roots and led by its original founders. For about 15 years, this was just how things were. And then, an emperor's decree came along and changed literally everything. Yeah, this stable, tight-knit community was about to get completely torn apart by an order from the most powerful guy in the world. This is what sets the stage for the whole conflict that made Paul's letter so necessary. So, picture this. It's 49 AD. The Emperor Claudius is just done. He's fed up with what he sees as constant infighting among the Jewish population in the city. His solution? It was blunt and it was brutal. Kick every single one of them out. Now, this edict didn't care if you were a Jewish person who followed Jesus or not. To the Romans, they were all just Jews, causing trouble. So, they were all forced to leave. And just like that, the entire identity of the church gets flipped on its head. This was a massive before and after moment. Suddenly, the non-Jewish members, the Gentiles, went from being the minority to the majority. New leaders had to step up. And of course, they brought their Roman and Greek customs with them, which started to shape the church's new culture. In just a few years, the whole community was fundamentally different. But the story doesn't end there. Nope. Because just 5 years later, the edict was lifted. The exiles were allowed to come back. And what they walked into? Well, it was a recipe for a massive culture clash. When Claudius died, the new emperor lifted the edict. So Jewish Christians who had been living in exile, like this well-known couple named Priscilla and Aquila, started to come home. But imagine, you finally get your return, and this spiritual home you helped build, it feels totally alien. The culture, the leadership, the way people acted, it was a church they just didn't recognize anymore. And this led to some really intense day-to-day arguments. I'm talking about things like, hey, should we be eating meat from the Roman markets? It might have been sacrificed to idols. Or, which days are actually holy anyway? And the big ones, how much do the ancient Jewish laws matter now? And, maybe most importantly, who's actually in charge around here? The church was basically split into two camps. So here's how Paul steps in and reframes the whole fight. It's actually genius. He doesn't label one side right and the other wrong. Instead, he calls the Gentile Christians, the ones who feel free in their faith, the strong. And he calls the Jewish Christians, with their consciences tied to tradition, the weak. He's shifting the debate away from who's right to who needs compassion. He's basically asking the majority group, the one with all the cultural power now, to look out for the minority. Okay, so the church is a mess. How does this get fixed? Well, this is where Paul, hearing about all this from miles away, decides he's got to do something.
And he doesn't just fire off an angry letter. He has a very clear, very strategic mission. All right, so the year is 57 AD. Paul's in the Greek city of Corinth, and he's getting these reports about the fractures in the Roman church. Now, he knows that a divided church is a weak church, and he has huge plans that require a strong, unified base of support in the capital. So he sits down to write. His letter isn't just a theological lecture, it's a strategic tool with a super clear three-part game plan. First, he wants to share what he calls a spiritual gift through his teaching, basically a deep understanding of the gospel that would make both groups theologically confident. Second, he wants them to find joy and encouragement together in that shared faith, to bridge that cultural gap. And third, and this one is the big one, he needs their support. He has this dream of taking the Christian message all the way to Spain, to the very edge of the known world, and he needs a unified Roman church to be his home base.
So Paul lays out this whole plan to visit them in person. But the way he actually ends up getting to Rome, oh man, it's one of the great ironies of his entire life. The plan was simple, right? He'd finish his work in the East, swing by Rome for a friendly, strategic visit, get their blessing and their support, and then he'd be off to Spain. Easy. But that is so not what happened. Not even close. Instead of showing up as a respected missionary, he gets arrested in Jerusalem. And because he's a Roman citizen, he appeals his case to the emperor. The result? He gets shipped to Rome, all right, as a prisoner in chains. And his journey there was just insane. He survives assassination plots, gets caught in a hurricane that completely wrecks his ship, and even survives a bite from a venomous snake on the island of Malta. It was a brutal 2-year ordeal just to get there. But after all of that, as he's finally walking toward the city, something incredible happens. The Christians from Rome, the very people he wrote that letter to, walked miles out of the city just to meet him on the road. And when this prisoner in chains saw them, he thanked God and took courage. That first part of his mission, to connect with them and find that mutual encouragement, it was fulfilled right there on the road. And even though he was a prisoner confined to a rented house, he actually accomplished his ultimate purpose. For 2 whole years, he taught the message of unity and faith from his letter, the exact spiritual gift he promised them. He did it boldly, without any hindrance, laying the theological foundation for the church right in the heart of the Roman Empire. So what does this whole story tell us? Maybe that sometimes the best way to heal the fractures inside a community isn't to just focus on the problems, but to rally around a mission that's bigger than all of you. It kind of leaves us with a question for our own time, doesn't it? When our own communities feel like they're at war with themselves, what's the shared mission that could be big enough to build a bridge?